Hi, Dr. Lamb here again with a quick look at Task 1, Planning. Remember, you have been out to your field experience classroom. You've seen your instructor teach. Uh, you have, so far for the first few weeks of this course, examined different types of lesson plans, such as the 5E learning cycle. You have, in your workshops, participated in labs that are somewhat different styles, but generally uh, similar with big picture science and teaching science as investigations. You've used your science notebook, so you should be starting to get a sense of a good science lesson and be ready to attempt writing your own, or at least writing one for this course that is in this EdTPA format lesson plan that we have in your field manual. Please, please, please do not attempt to begin writing your lesson plan without viewing Dr. Johnson's video on lesson planning and checking out her lesson plan handout that goes with that. Some of you may, in your field experience classroom, have some scripted science lessons, and your field experience teacher may not give you the option of actually designing your own science lesson to teach. If that's the case, please make sure and contact your lead instructor and let them know this, and we'll make adaptations to your assignment, understanding that that's the situation that you're placed in. Uh, in writing your lesson plan, make sure you refer to the field uh, manual. If I can get to it here, there we go. As this is the key, this is the format, this is what the rubrics for this course are designed to address. Uh, you also have the EdTPA handbook that you can use for input, and also the Making Good Choices support guide. Remember that the last two manuals are for the complete EdTPA, and we're not going through the entire process of EdTPA. So you might find some conflicting information in those manuals versus our lesson plan format you see on the screen here. Always, always, always refer to this lesson plan template as the final authority. So what it says in this template is what you're expected and what you're going to be measured on in this course. So let's move forward then into the idea of task one, which is the planning section. Remember, this isn't about trying to create some daunting task for you that stresses you out and makes you, break out in hives every time you mention the assignment. This is a task designed to not only get you into designing a good science inquiry lesson, and the main goal, but also the process that we keep referring to as EdTPA. That's the process that we're trying to get you used to that causes you to critically think about what it is you're planning. Instead of just looking at it from the viewpoint of, okay, this is the science content, and this is what I want to do with it, and where I want my information to go, you actually look at the students that you have in your classroom and your content, and how do those two things fit together best? What kind of adjustments do I need to make for this particular class that maybe I wouldn't have to make for the class across the hall or the class in the school, 5 miles away from where you're at? But specifically, what are you thinking as you're preparing this lesson for the students in your classroom? That's the important piece. Remember, you're going to go ahead and make all your responses directly on this form, and then that's what you're going to load into the Dropbox on D2L. All right, so the items that we're looking at in completing task one task 1 are the context for learning, which should already be done. Identifying your standards, looking at a central focus, stating the learning objective, writing out a rationale for your lesson, identifying the depth of knowledge or the level of Bloom's, identifying academic language, and addressing the diverse learner needs that are in your classroom. So let's look at each of those a little more closely. First, the context for learning. The context for learning short form should have been turned in last week. You should have inserted it right here into this section here and then addressed these different questions in the section, and that would have been turned in. But we don't want you to forget about it. The whole point of doing that was to have that information so that as you come here, as you begin to write this lesson, you are thinking about those things you identified in your context for learning. Remember to refer back to this as you plan your lesson to make sure that you're intentionally thinking about those students in your classroom as you do this lesson. It's going to be specifically important when you start to address the diverse learner. So, as we look about the information as we look at the information about the lesson, you can see here we're going to identify the standard. Hopefully, the field experience teacher has given you a topic. They might even give you a specific standard that they want addressed. And if that's the case, then that's good. Just make sure that it's either a next generation science standard or an Illinois state standard. If they give you a district standard, that's fine for the lesson you're going to be doing, but you're going to need to identify then what next generation science standard or what Illinois state standard is most closely aligned to that. So you're going to have to then, if they give you a district standard, you'll have to look up and see a next generation science standard that addresses. They may give you a standard, they may just give you a topic. Either way, you should be able to then identify a next generation science standard or Illinois standard. You refer to these websites to identify those standards, and then make sure you list that standard, just like I have highlighted here in the yellow, a literacy standard. You would write out that standard, identifying the strand and the specific standard. Okay, so you know your topic, you're able to identify a standard that you're going to be addressing. This means that you should be able to get to the central focus of the lesson. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to identify a central focus. The central focus is going to be a description of what it is you're going to be covering. What are those contents? What's that specific content or concept theme that you want your students to understand? Where you're wanting to bring them to. We're not just talking about these 5 facts or skills, but you should go beyond that. Make sure it's aligned to the standard that you mentioned above and the objective that you're going to be writing below. Okay? The learning objective and rationale. Learning objective, what is it that you want your student to learn from this lesson? It's simply stated. Um, what are you wanting them to come out of this lesson understanding? What's the point? Uh, that's relatively simple understanding there. The rationale or the context is what is it about your students that has led you to make the choices that you've made in planning out this lesson. So you've chosen to do a cooperative learning activity. Why? Why did you choose that instead of some other strategy? Um, Hopefully your context for learning can help you with that. Maybe previous lessons that have been done in the class by your field experience teacher have led you to make the choices that you made. That's fine. You're using the context that your students are in to make those decisions. So that's what we're looking for here. You are going to make a connection in your rationale to at least one of the theorists that we have talked about in class. It doesn't have to be the theorist that you specifically researched yourself. In the workshop session, you did a wall walk where you saw information and listened to small presentations about multiple theorists. So if one of those kind of hit home with you, a little more than the one that you researched yourself, that's fine. But one theorist or one theory needs to be applied to the rationale of what you're doing in your lesson. Specifically say, not just by dropping the name, but actually how the theory applies in what you've chosen to do in your lesson. Okay? Next is identifying the depth of knowledge or level of Bloom's taxonomy. Again, there's links on the form. Right here. There's a link to a PDF that shows you a good depth of knowledge wheel. And this is a link to a good resource from Iowa State University that has a couple of ways of looking at Bloom's taxonomy, and it's very helpful, very well done. I think you'll be able to see a good resource there, even if you don't use it in this lesson, possibly in future lessons. One hint though, you do need to go beyond simple recall or knowledge level of Bloom's. Again, what we've been doing in here is really trying to structure some inquiry, and inquiry asks questions and goes deeper than just identify these certain characteristics of an insect or draw certain parts of this food web. It needs to go deeper than that.